Want more HFY stories? Smash that subscribe button and ring the bell for notifications.
The world of Equus was a shattered mirror, its two faces locked in eternal opposition. The sunward side was a crucible of molten glass and razor-sharp dunes, where the air shimmered with heat and the ground crackled under the weight of 1 billion tons of irradiated sand. The dark side was a frozen tomb, where glaciers the size of continents groaned under their own weight, and the sky was a bruised, starless black. In the narrow twilight band, the terminus, where the two hemispheres met, life clung to existence like lichen on a tombstone. It was here, in the perpetual gloom, that the human settlement of Haven scraped out a meager existence. Kalen, a man whose face was a roadmap of hardship, stood at the edge of the settlement, staring into the sunward expanse. His breath misted in the thin air, a fleeting ghost against the oppressive silence. He was a keeper of stories, a weaver of myths, and in a world where reality was as harsh as the cold vacuum of space, stories were the only currency that mattered. The people of Haven had no grand technology, no fleet of starships. They had only their rituals, their superstitions, and their unshakable belief that the universe, for all its cruelty, operated on a set of hidden rules. Rules that could be bent, if not broken. The air grew heavy, a familiar dread settling over the settlement like a shroud. The Tellurics were coming. They were not creatures of flesh and blood, but towering beings of pure, crackling energy, shaped like storm clouds given form. They fed on the electromagnetic spectrum, consuming radio waves, microwaves, and the faint, desperate signals that Haven's technicians broadcast into the void. They were the ghosts of Equus, the lords of the terminus, and they were always hungry. Kalen closed his eyes, picturing the old symbols, the chalk lines drawn on the floor of the communal shelter, the incantations passed down from the first settlers. It was a fragile shield, a psychological trick, but it was all they had. The first sign of the Tellurics was not a sound, but a feeling. A pressure in the mind, a high-pitched hum that vibrated in the teeth. The sky above the sunward horizon began to warp, the colors bleeding into one another like oil on water. The settlers of Haven huddled in their shelters, their faces pale in the dim emergency lighting. Kalen moved among them, his voice a low, steady drumbeat in the growing panic. "Remember the words," he murmured, his hand resting on the shoulder of a young woman named Lyra, her knuckles white as she gripped a worn pendant. "The shield is strong. The shield is real." The Tellurics breached the terminus. They were not one, but a legion, a swirling vortex of blue and violet lightning that stretched from the horizon to the zenith. They did not walk. They flowed, a river of pure energy that surged toward the settlement. The electromagnetic shield, a web of generators and capacitors, flared to life, a brilliant, shimmering dome that encapsulated Haven. The Tellurics slammed into it, and the air filled with the sound of tearing metal and screaming electricity. The shield flickered, its light sputtering like a dying candle. Inside the shelter, the lights dimmed. A child began to cry, a thin, terrified sound that was quickly swallowed by the cacophony. Lyra looked to Kalen, her eyes wide with fear. "It's not enough," she whispered. "The shield is failing." Kalen's jaw was set, his gaze fixed on the maelstrom outside. He knew the stories, the myths of the first sacrifice, the one who gave their life force to power the shield, becoming a beacon that drove the Tellurics back. It was a legend, a fairy tale told to children. But in the crucible of Haven, legends had a way of becoming truth. The shield buckled. A section of it collapsed, and a tendril of Telluric energy snaked through, striking the generator housing. Metal screamed and melted, and a section of the settlement's outer wall vaporized. The cold, sterile air of the sunward side rushed in, carrying with it the scent of ozone and burnt sand. Panic erupted. People ran, screaming, their shadows long and distorted in the chaotic light. Kalen moved toward the breach, his robes fluttering in the energy storm. He was not running away. He was walking toward the heart of the storm. "Kalen, no!" Lyra cried, grabbing his arm. He turned to her, his face a mask of grim resolve. "The stories are real, Lyra. The first ones knew what they were doing." He pulled a small, obsidian stone from his pocket, its surface etched with spiraling symbols. It was a focus, a conduit for the will of the people. He pressed it into her hand. Hold this. Believe. When the time comes, you must be the one to lead them. He turned and stepped into the breach, the energy lashing at him like a physical blow. The tellurics swirled around him, their forms indistinct, their hunger a palpable presence. Kalen raised his hands, palms outward, and began to chant. The words were not from any human language, but a guttural, ancient tongue that resonated with the very fabric of Equus. The air around him thickened, coalescing into a shimmering, humanoid shape, a phantom of his own will. The phantom stood before him, facing the on-riving horde of energy. The tellurics recoiled, their forms flickering with confusion. They had faced weapons, machines, and brute force. They had never faced belief. The phantom of Kalen's will was a thing of terrible beauty, woven from the hopes and fears of every soul in Haven. It was not a weapon, but a promise. A promise that the people of Equus would not go quietly into the night. The tellurics, creatures of pure logic and consumption, could not comprehend it. They were drawn to it, not as prey, but as a paradox. They fed on energy, but this was energy imbued with meaning, with purpose. It was a flavor they had never tasted, a frequency that disrupted their very existence. The phantom raised its hands, and the air hummed with power. A wave of force, invisible but undeniable, pulsed outward. The tellurics shrieked, a sound that was not heard but felt, a vibration that shattered the remaining glass in the settlement. The phantom began to grow, absorbing the chaotic energy of the tellurics, turning their power against them. It was a dangerous game, a dance with annihilation. Kalen felt his own life force draining, his vision tunneling. He was the anchor, the conduit, and the price was his own existence. Outside the shield, the remaining settlers watched in awe and terror. Lyra clutched the focus, its surface warm in her hand. She closed her eyes, focusing on the stories Kalen had told her, the myths of the first settlers, the rituals that had kept them alive through generations. She poured her belief into the stone, and it began to glow, a soft, golden light that pulsed in time with her heartbeat. The light spread, weaving through the settlement, strengthening the shield, feeding the phantom. The people felt it, a surge of unity, a shared purpose that transcended their individual fears. They began to chant, their voices rising in a single, powerful crescendo. The tellurics were in disarray. Their cohesive vortex was breaking apart, their individual forms lashing out blindly. They had encountered resistance before, but never this. Never a force that fought back not with violence, but with conviction. The phantom, fueled by the collective will of Haven, grew larger, its form becoming more defined, more solid. It was no longer a mere projection. It was a being of pure will, a god born in the twilight of a dead world. Kalen's body was failing. He sank to his knees, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The phantom turned to him, its faceless head tilting in a gesture of sorrow. It was an extension of him, a reflection of his sacrifice. He had given everything, and in return, it would give them a chance. With a final, silent command, the phantom surged forward, engulfing the nearest telluric. The energy being screamed, a sound that was both a physical and metaphysical agony, as its form unraveled, consumed by the phantom's will. One by one, the tellurics fell, their essence devoured by the storm of belief. The silence that followed was more profound than the chaos that preceded it. The air was still, the energy dissipated into the ether. The phantom lingered for a moment, a faint outline against the darkening sky, before it too faded, leaving nothing but a sense of profound loss and a lingering warmth in the air. Kalen's body lay where he had fallen, his eyes closed, a faint smile on his lips. He had done what was necessary. He had become the legend. The people of Haven emerged from their shelters, their faces streaked with dust and tears. The sunward expanse was quiet, the tellurics gone. But the victory was hollow. Kalen was gone, and with him, the heart of their community. Lyra walked to his body, the focus still warm in her hand. She knelt beside him, her fingers brushing his cold cheek. The stories were true. The sacrifice had worked. But at what cost? A funeral was held, a simple ceremony under the indifferent stars. They buried Kalen in the center of the settlement, a marker of rough-hewn stone placed over the grave. The focus was laid upon the stone, a silent sentinel. Lyra stood before it, her head bowed. The others looked to her, their faces a mixture of grief and hope. She was the keeper of the stories now. She was the one who would have to guide them. The days that followed were filled with a quiet determination. The settlement was rebuilt, stronger this time, with new rituals and new symbols carved into the walls. Lyra became their leader, her authority unchallenged. She was not Kalen, but she carried his legacy in her heart. She taught the children the old stories, the tales of sacrifice and belief. She showed them how to draw the symbols, how to chant the time passed on Equus, measured in the cycles of the sun and the slow creep of the glaciers. The settlement of Haven grew, its people adapting to the harsh world, their rituals evolving. Lyra grew old, her hair the color of snow, her eyes the color of the twilight sky. She had led them through countless seasons, her wisdom a guiding light. But she knew the truth. The Tellurics were not gone. They were waiting, biding their time, learning from their defeat. They were not creatures of emotion, but of intellect, and they were patient. One day, the signs returned. The air grew heavy, the sky began to warp. The settlers looked to Lyra, their faces pale with fear. She stood before them, her back straight, her voice steady. "The shield is strong," she said, echoing Kalen's words from so long ago. "The shield is real." She led them to the central generator, her hands moving over the controls with practiced ease. The shield flared to life, a brilliant dome encapsulating the settlement. The Tellurics came, a swirling vortex of energy, but this time, they were different. They were more organized, their forms more defined. They had learned. The shield held, but it was strained. The generators were old, their power waning. Lyra knew they could not last. She looked at the focus, glowing softly on its pedestal. It was tied to the settlement's collective will, but that will was fading, worn down by years of fear. They needed a new source of power, a new belief. She thought of Kalen, his sacrifice, the phantom he had become. It had been an act of pure selflessness, a gift of his own life force. Could they replicate it? Lyra gathered the people in the central square. "We must make a new ritual," she said, her voice ringing with authority. "A ritual of unity, not of sacrifice, but of creation." She explained her plan. They would not draw energy from a single person, but from the entire community. They would focus their collective will, not on defense, but on creation. They would build something new, something that would resonate with the universe itself, a beacon of hope that the Tellurics could not comprehend. The people were hesitant. They had grown used to the old ways, the rituals of protection. But Lyra's vision was compelling. They began to work, their movements synchronized, their voices rising in a single, harmonious chant. They built a structure in the center of the square, a tower of crystal and metal, its surface inscribed with symbols of unity and creation. As they worked, their belief grew, the focus glowing brighter, the air humming with energy. The Tellurics pressed against the shield, their forms flickering with frustration. They could feel the change, the shift in the energy field. It was not a weapon, but a promise. The tower was completed. It stood tall and proud, a beacon in the twilight. Lyra stood before it, her hands outstretched. "Now," she said, "we give it life." The people joined hands, forming a circle around the tower. They focused their will, their hopes, their dreams into the structure. The tower began to glow, a soft, warm light that pulsed outward. The shield flickered, then stabilized, the Tellurics recoiling from the new energy. It was not a force of destruction, but of creation, a frequency they could not consume. The Tellurics were in chaos. Their cohesive form was breaking apart, their individual entities lashing out at the new energy. They had encountered resistance before, but this was different. This was not a shield, but a challenge. A promise that life, in all its forms, would find a way. They drew back, their forms dissolving into the ether, leaving the terminus quiet once more. The people of Haven cheered, their voices ringing with triumph. They had done it. They had created something new. Lyra stood before the tower, her face streaked with tears. It was not a victory of weapons or sacrifice, but of belief. They had faced the void and had not been consumed. They had turned the universe's own power against it, not with force, but with faith. The tower was a symbol of their resilience, a testament to the power of their collective will. It was a new beginning. The years passed, and the tower became the heart of Haven. It was a source of power, a beacon of hope, a reminder of what they could achieve when they stood together. Lyra grew old, her hair the color of snow, her eyes the color of the twilight sky. She would often sit by the tower, watching the stars, her mind filled with the stories of the past and the promise of the future. She had lived a long life, a life filled with purpose. She had guided her people through darkness, and in doing so, had become a legend in her own right. One night, as Lyra sat by the tower, a figure appeared before her. It was tall and indistinct, its form shimmering with energy, like the Tellurics, but different. It was not hostile, but curious. It had been watching them, studying their rituals, their beliefs. It was the last of the Tellurics, the one that had survived, the one that had learned. It had come not to destroy, but to understand. Lyra did not flinch. She had faced worse. "You are the void," she said, her voice steady. The being tilted its head, a gesture that was almost like a bow. It reached out a tendril of energy, and Lyra felt not fear, but a sense of peace. It showed her its memories, its existence, its purpose. It was a being of pure energy, a creature of the universe, and it had found something on Equus that it had never encountered before. It had found belief. The being lingered for a moment, its form flickering in the light of the tower. Then, it was gone, dissolving into the night sky. Lyra watched it go, a faint smile on her lips. The void had found something on Equus. It had found hope. She closed her eyes, the stories of Kalen, the rituals of her people, the tower they had built. It was all a part of something larger, something that transcended the stars. The universe was vast and full of terrors, but it was also full of wonder. And in the twilight of Equus, the people of Haven had proven that even the smallest light could shine brightest in the darkest places.